testnevelés múltjáról, jelenjéről, főbb kihívásairól már hallhattunk a délelőtti két előadás folyamán, mind Európában, köztük Magyarországon, illetve az Amerikai Egyesült Államokban is. Azonban a minőségi testnevelésről, ami a mai napnak a fő témája, majd most kezdünk el először konkrétumokról beszélni, a kivetítőn majd most lehet meglátni, hogy miről is van szó. Azt tudjuk, hogy a szakemberek különböző rendszerek alapján vizsgálják ugyanazokat a tényezőket, azonban egyértelműen az látszik, hogy létezik egy olyan közös rendszer, egy mérce, amik az eljárások és termékekre vonatkozó tényezők önálló vizsgálatát is alkalmazni lehet. Többek között erről is szól majd Claude Scheuer úrnak az előadása, az Európai Testnevelési Egyesület elnökéről van szó. Az előadás címe a minőségi testnevelés európai távlatai. Kérem Claude Scheuert, hogy tartsa meg prezentációját.
So, good morning, dear guests, dear participants, dear organizers, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank you, the Hungarian School Sport Federation, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk about quality physical education in Europe, and this especially from the perspective of the PE teachers. So, I will start with some historical aspects and also definitions about quality physical education, because in the beginning it's important to have a common view on what is physical education about, and then also quality physical education. Then I'm talking about the position of the European physical education in this topic and what we are thinking about it. I will not come to an end in this point, because we are at the moment in a phase where we are discussing and trying to find a position statement on quality physical education. Then I will have a short point about quality physical education on EU policy level, and it was Laszlo who before already mentioned many things that are also here in my presentation. I will have a short point about lifelong learning and quality physical education, and finally maybe some ideas about future directions. So starting with the first one, I want to also integrate the view of UNESCO, talking about physical education and quality physical education. This because the UNESCO organized last year in Berlin the -5 conference, and there was quality physical education one of the major topics. So UNESCO started already more than 60 years ago to promote PE and sport, and in 1978 was established the International Charter of Physical Education and Sport, which outlines the case for PE as a fundamental right for all. I think that this was an important step, and since then UNESCO is doing some work in policy development as one of the core priorities of UNESCO's intergovernmental organization, CGEPS. And this also with the endorsement of the International Council of Sports Science and Physical Education. I mentioned already the -5 conference of 2013 in Berlin. And as I said before, the promotion of public investment in quality physical education featured there as a key issue in the agenda. And the outcome was the Declaration of Berlin, which there recalls that physical education is an essential entry point for children to learn life skills, develop patterns for lifelong physical activity, participation, and health lifestyle behaviors. So exactly what we were already talking before. I go on with some definitions of quality physical education, and just to bring forward some points that are important from our point of view. And again, I have here the definition of quality physical education by UNESCO, which is in their guidelines for policymakers that are about to come out officially this year. And it was a longer process to develop these guidelines, where several expert groups from the field of PE were involved to give advice on it, and as for example, our association, the European Physical Association. So talking about quality physical education, we have planned progressive inclusive learning experiences, and that in all years of school, early years, primary and secondary school education. It should be the foundation for lifelong engagement in physical activity and sports. Physical education should be developmentally appropriate and should help the children and the young students to acquire psychomotor skills, cognitive understanding, and social and emotional skills. I go on with another definition of quality physical education. This one is by HIPE, which is the International Association of Higher Education Institutions in Physical Education. They published this year a position statement on physical education and teacher education, and there they also had to define in some way quality physical education. And as you can see, it's quite the same elements in this definition as in the one of UNESCO, except maybe that we talk here about knowledge, skills, and dispositions that should be developed in the children and students' learning. So, what I want to add to this is that it is maybe difficult to exactly define physical education or quality physical education. We had now some quite complete definitions, but what does this mean exactly? We need indicators for this if you want to assess or monitor quality PE, but what is sure is that quality physical education can be developed and experienced. And one main indicator from our point of view should be how the concerned and involved persons experience quality PE. So I will come back to this later, but I can already say that maybe we should not only think about product evaluation, but also process evaluation, which means that the process is of high importance. It's not only the outcomes. And what also means that quality physical education needs a really holistic approach on different activity levels. Holistic because it's not only about physical activity or fitness, but also about skills and competencies, and also the impact then on lifelong learning. I come to my second point, which is the European physical education and its view on quality physical education. Please allow me to talk about a little bit about our association, which was founded in 1991 in Brussels. And also in that year was published the Declaration of Madrid, which again was amended in Brussels in 2011, which gives the framework that we are working on and what we are advocating for. And the main slogan of EUPEA is there is no education without physical education. Maybe you have heard already about it. So we are the umbrella organization of national physical education associations in Europe, which means that PE teacher associations in the European countries are generally member in the umbrella association or organization EUPEA. Besides this, we also have institutional members like some faculties or universities or the Hungarian School Sport Federation. So we focus on the promotion of and the advocacy for physical education, and we have a lot of cooperations with other international agents and associations like, for example, the International Council for Sports Science and Physical Education, FIEP, the International Federation for Physical Education, ISEP, I mentioned them before, ENSO, and some others. And what we try to do is to have good context to the European Union Commission and the Council of Europe in order to advocate for PE. And we were, for example, an observer in a previous expert group of the EU Commission about sports, health, and participation. And of course, we try to be, again, an observer in one of the upcoming working groups. And then we are a standing member in the consultative committee of the EPAs, of the Enlarged Partial Agreements of Sports of the Council of Europe. Just a small background of what we are. So our definition of quality physical education is still some work in progress. We had a seminar about this topic in April in Paris, organized together with UNESCO and the French PE Teacher Association. And in order to prepare the discussions there in workshops around the topic of QPE, we had a view on what different authors say to what categories of quality indicators in PE we have. And you can identify quite similar categories, and we agreed on, as you can see in the final column, that there are indicators on a structural level, on a process level, and on a product level. But this is not enough. Those indicators sometimes are settled on a more global level, which is the system level, the school system level. Others are more on the school level, and finally others are situated on the classroom level. And again, then we have different perspectives on all those categories and levels, which can be a practical perspective, which of course should be mainly the one of the PE teachers, because they had to put in practice this. And we have a political perspective, of course. When we advocate for PE, we have to find arguments, and many decisions are also taken on political level, so we have a political perspective. And finally, last but not least, of course, the scientific perspective. I will come back to this also later on. So here is an overview of what I've said now. Generally, you can maybe say that talking about structural indicators on a structural level, they mostly have an impact on the system or on the school level. The process is more on school and classroom level, whilst indicators about products can be situated on all of three levels, but mainly on the classroom level. We use this, let's say, framework to analyze some existing documents and papers, position statements of PE teacher associations in Europe, but not only. We also had a look at the documents of NASP in the US. I think that when you think seriously about quality physical education, you can't ignore the work of NASP. So this is why we integrated this also. And this was the analysis of this, and the outcome of this was presented at the seminar in Paris. And there is at the moment a publication in print already where we brought this together in an article. You can see the reference below, the table, which is then Quality in PE, an overview from the perspective of PE teacher associations. This will be published in a book, which is, this is maybe also interesting to say, is a common project of the FIEP, which is the more scientific part of PE, and then EUPEA as the practitioners, let's say. We have an alliance with FIEP, and this is one of our first real outcomes in the frame of this alliance. I will not now go into details on the outcomes of this analysis. I will integrate it in the conclusion, but what I'm going to show you is what we found out about ourselves, our view on QPE, because we also have already some position statements, documents that also touch the topic of quality physical education. And from the perspective of UPA, we of course need teachers that are well qualified in PE at all levels. From our point of view, CPD, continuing professional development, is very important and should be compulsory, with the view on lifelong learning of PE teachers. We have also indications about knowledge of first aid. What is most important, physical education should be an integral part of education on all school levels. The curriculums should be broad and balanced. And of course, and this is what is every time mentioned in any documents, we need appropriate time, resources, and learning environments in order to reach the goals that are defined in PE curriculums. And at least here in Hungary now you have the appropriate time, which also means on the other side that there will be other problems, maybe with resources and facilities and so on. On classroom level, from our point of view, teachers must understand the needs of the young people. This is very important. It's not enough to have a curriculum that we try to put in practice just like this. We have to have a look at every child. And so we have to respond positively to the individual needs of each of the children that we have to do with. Which is also important is a positive and healthy relationship between the children, the students, and also between teacher and students. And the atmosphere in that PE classes are organized should be safe, positive, and encouraging. Finally, everyone should be treated equal and fair. I think that all these elements or indicators are also important to reach quality PE. I talked about it before. This is many of the things are settled on the process level. So in order to, if you want to assess quality PE, you don't have to omit the processes. So let me give you a short conclusion about the analysis of these documents. What can be said from the perspective of PE Teacher Association is that those documents are very often, let's say, developed in a quite pragmatic way. It is a pragmatic approach. And of course, it's the practical perspective from the point of view of the PE teacher that very often is there in the focus. But also, generally, those associations are also advocating for PE on policy level. It is also the political perspective that is important. But what is absent mostly is the scientific perspective. And this is why we think that it is important to cooperate with scientifics, academics, with research, and this is why we are going in cooperations with FIEP and ISEP, and I think our members, the national associations, should do the same in their countries. I know that there are good examples of those corporations in some countries in Europe, but there are also other ones where it could be more. I just want to show you this slide. We are still working on the outcome of this seminar that we had in Paris in April, and we are going to present this during our next forum in Italy, in Milan, in mid-October. Where we are going to present a position statement about quality physical education, and we are also going to publish this in an article. But the main indicators or topics that have been identified in the discussions, in the very fruitful workshops, in this Paris seminar, you can see them here: PE advocacy, PE assessment. We talked already a lot bit today, PE assessment, PE concept, context, curricula, lessons, teachers, and school. I don't want to go into details because, as I said, this is work in progress. I come to the EU policy level. Many things have been said before by Laszlo. I'm going to show you some extracts of the documents that he talked about, so it will complete what he said. And as I started with UNESCO, and because they are doing quite a good job in developing these guidelines for policymakers in quality physical education, I'm also referring to their documents. The EU Physical Activity Guidelines from 2008, I took out some things that really mention the topics that are important for us, that I mentioned already before. I won't read this for you. I think that by integrating physical education in these physical activity guidelines, this was already a very important step for stakeholders in PE. Then it's also the European Parliament that is reflecting about physical education. I here have some points, some bullet points out of the European Parliament resolution on the European dimension of sports from 2012. under the topic of social role of sport. And here it's also the call on the member states to ensure that sport, as you can see in point 2, becomes a subject in the curriculum of schools of all kinds, and underlines the importance of encouraging participation in sports at all levels of education. So I think that all those documents, even if these are resolutions and not binding for anyone, they are important. They can be used by organizations that we are for advocating, and it shows that politicians are reflecting about those topics. Then we have the Council recommendation on promoting health-enhancing physical activity across sectors 2013. And here, physical education at school was identified as having the potential to be an effective tool to increase awareness of the importance of health-enhancing physical activity, and therefore schools can be easily and effectively targeted to implement activities in this regard. So, as it was mentioned before, national strategies to promote health-enhancing physical activities should be developed, and health-enhancing physical activity monitoring frameworks should be established. And, of course, PE should be part of those works. Here you can see proposed indicators when you are talking about monitoring. I won't go into details into this, but as you can see here, point 13, it's talked about number of hours per school level, mandatory or optional, national or subnational regulation. There could be much more indicators, but education, physical education is mentioned here, which is important. Then the resolution of the Council on the EU Work Plan for Sport 2013. Also here, sport and society, the importance of physical education in order to reach the goals in HIPE. And as it was mentioned before, there will be an expert group on health-enhancing physical activity, and it would be important to have there maybe observers that are talking for physical education. I said before I would also talk about documents of UNESCO. In the follow-up of the NINEPS 5 Declaration of Berlin, UNESCO decided to develop guidelines for QPE for governments. This should be published this year. And here you can find also some very, let's say, positive elements that should help governments that are going the way to do this work and to improve quality physical education. This can really help them. Like, for example, carry out a national needs analysis on quality PE provision, develop a national strategy for the provision of quality physical education. The concept of inclusive quality physical education is highlighted, and also, again, the teacher education. But of course, it has to be said, these are guidelines, and it is under the responsibility of national governments to decide if they are going to use them or not. And as far as I heard now, UNESCO is looking for some countries that are piloting this, and it has to be said that countries from Europe are a little bit defensive with regard to this. It's more countries from, let's say, Africa or South America that are interested in this, because they have, I think, even bigger problems than we have with quality physical education provision. Maybe it's also because for European countries it's more the work on the EU level that is important, but I think this is could also help national governments if they are interested in pursuing their efforts here. Here also core aspects in these guidelines of inclusive QPE provision. I want maybe highlight physical literacy. It was mentioned in the presentation before from the United States. I think that the physical literacy concept is a very important one, and it's good that it's also mentioned in these guidelines, because also from our point of view, it shows good what PE should be about and what should be the outcome. which is physically literate students. Or, as we used to talk, to name it before in EUPEA, physically well-educated children and students. We had a research on this some years ago. So this is what PE should all be about. And in order to reach these goals, we need quality PE. The UNESCO guidelines also foresee some benchmarks for quality physical education on different levels, because there are maybe basic needs in more developing countries, and let's say in other countries where the basic needs are already in place, we have other benchmarks. And you can see the different categories here. And this leads me already to some ideas about lifelong learning and quality physical education. But here I want to have the perspective, the view on the lifelong learning of PE teachers, because we are the PE teachers, and I think, or we think, that it is very important to have this continuous professional development in order that we can go the right steps in the future as PE teachers. So again, here about some ideas about from the document of the ISEP about from their position statement on PE teacher education. And ISEP believes that quality physical education teacher education programs are those where graduate teachers are lifelong learners, which means that already in the initial phases of teacher programs, we have to build the basis for the lifelong learning that comes after this. In the same idea, I think we have to do it with our students in PE classes. We are not only delivering a curriculum, but we are going to build the basis for them as future citizens, and that what we give them on the way in physical education should help them to be physical active citizens that live a healthy lifestyle. So it's the same idea for both the students and the teachers on the respective sides. And also here you find some words in the UNESCO guidelines for QPE. High quality pre- and in-service training for teachers based on respect for human rights and the principles of inclusive education is an essential element for supporting teacher effectiveness and thus for QPE. And also here we need compulsory, structured, regular CPD programs or in-service training. I want to add also here something. Every one of us knows that lifelong learning is very important for our society. I just want to give you one example. Talking about maybe some 24 years ago, in 1990, we didn't know what life would be like today. We didn't know that we would use smartphones or that we would have our phones with us and that we could go online with them in the internet and acquire information from everywhere in the world. Just as one example, there are many examples. And so in the same idea, we don't know what is in 2040. And in order, when we now educate our, for example, teachers that they're going to work for 40 years, we don't know what their job will be or look like in even 20 years. So this makes us need some flexible and adaptive models that can also be adapted at any moment. I come to the last point of my presentation, which is about future directions in QPE. I would maybe prefer to say these are some ideas. So, what do we need to improve quality physical education? I would say, coming back to what I said before, the scientific perspective is very important. We need research-based and empirical evidence. Of course, we have this is done, but we are not very successful to bring this to the practitioners, which means we as the PE teachers have to cooperate with the academics and the researchers they can deliver us worthwhile information in order that we can improve our job, our work that we do. And on the other side, scientifics, they need, of course, feedback from practitioners and information from practitioners. And again, I therefore think that both sides have to work together. Then we need instruments for quality. In general, to measure quality and to assess quality, and also to change development. And this, from the perspective of PE teachers, we need this for PE teachers, or better for PE teacher departments in school, in order that teachers that work in one school can by themselves have a look at the quality of the PE lessons they deliver. There are some topics that here could be of relevance, talking about process management and of course also process evaluation, strategy development, SWOT analysis, and internal or maybe also external evaluation. Of course, PE teachers must be ready for this, and I'm sure that this is not yet the case. This makes it again important that we have PE teacher teaching programs that are preparing for this. I just want to show you one slide from an example of Switzerland, which is maybe, which is already quite a good, nice model. In Switzerland, they have a program which is called Quality in PE, and this was established by the federal administration responsible for physical education. And this is a tool which is structured like this on the input, on the process, and on the output. And it functions like this, that they have an internet resource where PE teachers in a school, they can use this in order to have a look at some indicators that give them a feedback on the quality of their PE. Not only PE lessons, but also as it is then organized in a specific school. And I think this could be one of several possible models that could be used all over Europe. Maybe there are other countries that have already such tools. I go on. I think that we need systems and mechanisms for monitoring, and quality assurance should be developed to promote good practice and accountability within quality PE policy making and implementation. So I think that we can agree that we need this, but in order to have it, this is another question. The same for European benchmarks with regard to the evaluation of PE and aspects of quality, and a topic that UP thinking about very intensively, which is an observatory, a European observatory for quality physical education. In order to reach these goals, or to start the process of reaching these goals, we need common efforts on a European level in the field of PE. I think that it's important to work together. The different stakeholders in physical education should bring together their efforts in order to be more successful. And in this, we need a holistic and a multi-perspective approach. And I think that I can end my presentation here with coming back to what Laszlo said before. I think that the European Commission gives already quite a good framework and gives the opportunity to apply for fundings in the Erasmus Plus funding scheme and others. And common efforts are needed in order that we can maybe successful in applying for funds in order that we can put in practice that what is here mentioned in the future directions in quality physical education. So I want to thank you. Whoops, I was missing something. I want to thank you for your attention. And as I said, we have this EUPEA forum in Milan in Italy in October. And when you want to have more information about this, you can have a look at our homepage, and we are also on Twitter. Thank you very much.